Chapter 41. In order to save space, the door of the caravan in the cannibal village is a sliding door. Muzi King went to the innermost room and opened the door and saw Wei Ran wearing a tight-fitting thermal base layer with exquisite and seductive curves lying on the soft quilt, and her two slender legs dangling on her hips dangle away. He gritted his teeth fiercely, with regret welling up in the bottom of his eyes. What a charming little fairy. Put up a barrier. Without saying a word, he closed the door and put his feet on the bed, hugged her into his arms, pulled her on the quilt, and began to knead her soft flesh. Gradually, Wei Ran was panting slightly from his pinch, and her groans were about to overflow, but she still didn't forget that the sound insulation of the caravan was not that good, and she bit her lip to prevent her from wandering. Wei Ran struggled intermittently and murmured softly. Muzi King grabbed her tender lips and swallowed all her words into his mouth. After the kiss, he stroked the blush at the corners of Wei Ran's eyes, which was very attractive. His chest trembled slightly, he laughed a few times in a low voice, sucked the soft flesh next to his ear, and panted for hot breath. Muzi King pulled open the curtains. Although he knew that Muzi King could not see or hear the inside of the barrier set up by Muzi King, but it still gave birth to excitement. After walking on the road for a few days, he spent the night in a wild caravan, but this day he passed a village. Feeling stuffy inside the car, Wei Ran lowered the window a little, but when passing the village entrance, she smelled a pungent smell. Muzi King frowned slightly. Instead, she whispered in Wei Ran's ear, and Wei Ran nodded. Jiang Nianfeng drove around here, and found that there was no trace of alien invasion here, and there were more than 10 intact cars parked in a large open space. As the evening approached, they decided to spend the night here before night fell. They stopped at a house that was no longer inhabited. Wei Ran and Yan Yang cleaned up briefly. Dinner is instant hot food prepared in the car. Put cold water in the instant hot bag and you can heat it for 15 minutes. During this time slot, Jiang Nianfeng wanted to drive the car into the yard so that Wei Ran and Yan Yang could sleep in the car tonight. When he walked to the door, he noticed a young man protruding from a corner not far away. Just now, Muzi King had already said that there were people here, so he waved his hand enthusiastically and said, "Hello, my fellow." But the man quickly entered the door and slammed the door hard. Jiang Nianfeng didn't care. After all, it was the end of the world. No one was vigilant, not to mention this kind of remote small village generally rejected the arrival of outsiders. While they were eating, there was an old man's hoarse voice at the gate of the yard. "Young man, where are you from?" They looked at the door and saw an old man in his 60s or 70s. Chen Wei got up and responded, "Old man. We are from Ruishi." In this troubled time, Chen Wei didn't tell the truth, but just said that we were in a small town near Beijing. To the pedestrians inside, he glanced at Chen Wei, smiled kindly and said, "It's a long way from here, isn't it tiring on the way?" Chen Wei walked a few steps closer, looked at the old man, and said casually, "Isn't this the case of a horrible monster appearing everywhere to eat people? There is no way to live there, so we can only move away." The old man frowned and nodded. "Head people usually pass by us, and they all say they were forced to escape by monsters. Alas, the end of the world is difficult, our place is too remote, and now only my family is left in the village. It's okay for you to travel long distances. I brought some water for you. Don't worry, it's clean and unpolluted." As he spoke, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared beside him, holding 2 cans of unopened mineral water. Chen Wei noticed something strange, but he still stepped forward to take the water and thanked him with no difference on his face. "Thank you so much, old man. What's your name?" "Is the village head here? If you don't mind, go to my house to rest. It's just around the front corner. It's clean and spacious." Chen Weigang wanted to refuse, but Muzi King's deep voice sounded behind him, then disturbed the village head. No, it's not a big deal. I'll go back and pack up. You can come over later." Chen Wei watched village chief Wang and the middle-aged man disappear behind the corner. Looking seriously at Muzi King, he said, "Brother Cheng, the village chief said that everyone in the village has left, but just now we passed by an open space, and saw more than a dozen cars. If the whole family moves, it is impossible not to want cars. Still with this water, the most precious water to his subordinates, he gave 2 cans at once. Muzikang glanced at the direction where the village chief disappeared, and then looked at the water, with a sneer on the corner of his mouth. Since he wants us to go if you are a guest, then let's go and have a look. When Muzikang and his party arrived at the village chief's house, it was just dark. When I got to the door, I smelled that unpleasant smell again. Muzikang glanced at the wet water on the corner of the wall. The village chief's house is a courtyard house with white walls and red tiles, which looks a little strange in the silent night. They walked into the pitch-black courtyard, took candles from their backs and lit them. When Wei ran past a red pillar with a candle, she noticed a splash of dark red that was different from the color of the pillar. Taking advantage of the village chief walking in front, she touched it with her hands and smelled it. She chatted toward the village chief in front of her. "Sil, why don't you go? Are you not afraid of zombies?" The village chief led them through a dark corridor without turning back. "Maybe it's too crowded here, it's remote. We don't use tap water, we only drink well water. The pollution doesn't reach the groundwater so quickly, and there are no monsters in the village. Everyone in the village has left, and my family and I didn't want to leave, so we stayed." Wei Ran looked at the village. His long eyes were full of sharpness, and he took out a wet towel to wipe his dirty fingers bit by bit. Walking out of the promenade, you can vaguely see a moonlight in front of it, which seems to be an open courtyard, and it seems to smell a familiar stench. Open patios are common in old houses. In fact, it is an open space with no cover on the top and a flat square on the ground. In the past, the patio was used for lighting, but later it was used for various cleanings for the convenience of holding weddings. When he was about to walk out of the promenade, the village chief stood still beside the courtyard with an oil lamp, and the stench became even stronger. Jiang Nanfeng, who was afraid of ghosts, clung to Gu Ming and shouted at the village chief, "Why don't you leave the..." Village chief slowly turned his head and grinned his white teeth. The oil lamp illuminated the village chief's wrinkled face, and his laughter was creepy gloomy. "GGG. Where are you going? This is the arrival." Jiang Nanfeng took a candle, covered his mouth and nose, and looked around, but the candle light was very limited, and he couldn't see anything, but he felt that it was definitely nothing a place to rest. He, can't see clearly? I'll give you a light." The village chief waved his hand and torches were lit around the courtyard, and the light immediately illuminated the surroundings. Only then did Wei Ran and his party see the courtyard clearly. At this time, the courtyard in front of him was stained with blood, and there were unprocessed pieces of meat and bones on the ground. The thigh bones were clearly human bones. Rows of meat are hanging on both sides of the patio, drying in the air. Chapter 42. Cannibal Village 2. Stood around a dozen men with knives in their hands, staring at them fiercely. Jiang Nanfeng, who has been sticking close to Gu Ming since he came in here, knew what was going on just by looking at this posture. He straightened up and snorted, "Village chief, I didn't expect you to be honest and want to make trouble." At Jiang Nanfeng's words, the others all looked at Jiang Nanfeng in surprise. Seeing that they were all looking at him, Jiang Nanfeng asked in puzzlement, "What? Isn't this posture meant to fuck us? Could it be so obvious that I could guess wrong?" "It's not early." Su Yi kindly wanted to remind something, but he was intercepted by Chen Wei. After Chen Wei glanced at the expressionless Gu Ming next to Jiang Nanfeng, he looked at Jiang Nanfeng sadly. Nanfeng, let me do it for myself." Jiang Nanfeng became more and more confused and could only ask Gu Ming beside him, "Ming, what do they mean?" Gu Ming's eyes flashed in success, but his face remained calm. "I don't know." A burly man fiercely raised a knife and pointed at them. "You talk so much before you die." The village head raised his hand to stop the man and smiled sinisterly. "Hey, Ergu, after all, he is the one who brings supplies to the village, so be more polite." Muziking noticed some of the meat strips hanging in the courtyard have been cured into dried meat strips, and it can be seen that it has been a few days. "Everyone who passes through this village must be hung here to make jerky." Muziking turned his black eyes to the village chief and said coldly, "Looking at the amount, you have gained a lot." Suddenly, A cold night wind blows into the courtyard, and the meat sticks that are still dripping with fat on both sides are swayed by the wind. As soon as Muzi King said this, when the wind blew, Wei Ran and the others frowned at the strong smell of bacon. The strong nausea couldn't be stopped, and Yan Yang couldn't help but vomit a few times. Since the outbreak of zombies, many people in the village have also turned into zombies. Those who survived escaped by hiding in the underground storage room, but the shortage of supplies soon followed. This is an extremely remote and extremely poor backward village. Relying on the height of the sky and the distance of the emperor, any matters that need to be adjudicated are usually lynched by the so-called ancestral clan relatives, and there is a lot of blood on their hands. There is no moral bottom line in itself, let alone for this life-saving moment. The village chief looked at the courtyard covered with meat strips, and then smelled the smell, which seemed to make him reluctant to part. He pointed to a pile of bacon among them, and said excitedly, "This is a family of 3 who came here a week ago." The man and the 3-year-old child were freshly cured that night. The child's skin is tender and the meat is the best. That's right, woman, let her live to the men in our village first. It's a pity that she is useless, and she lost her breath in just a few days. No, the pile of bones in the courtyard belongs to that woman. Wei Ran. When they heard this, their faces became gloomy and cold, and they could even think of the miserable scene. Wei Ran knew that there were such things in the last days. Those people were desperate to survive, even more terrifying than zombies and aliens. But Wei Ran still hated this kind of behavior to the extreme. With a cold face, "It's really a disgusting bunch of stinking wild dogs." Gao took a step forward, furiously. "Stinky bitch. You will know my master later. It's so powerful that you can scream enough. Don't talk to them anymore. I'm going to skin those men alive and use the skin for barbecue." A young man squinted at Wei Ran. "Brother Ergu. Wait a minute, I want to taste this woman first. I was the last to get on that woman before. Both holes were rotten. I didn't enjoy it at all, but the village chief, why are these people still normal? I'm already out of consciousness now. I can't wait to torture that woman severely." The young man reacted lewdly. Muzi King exuded an aura that was harsher than winter, and his eyes were cold. In the next second, the young man uttered a more miserable cry, fell to the ground and rolled. His bare skin was still steaming from the mature flesh, and the man lost his breath in an instant. Wei Ran is Muzi King's Achilles heel. Anyone who says something bad, Muzi King will tell him to shut up, but this way of shutting up is sometimes a little bit cruel. The village chief looked at Muzi King and his party suddenly when he saw the man's miserable state. "Supernatural power. How is it possible? How can you still use supernatural powers?" The village chief looked at Muzi King and his party in surprise. Why are they, who should have been aware of hallucinations, still sober now? Muzi King turned to the village chief coldly. "We did smell the yellow leather urine you spilled at the entrance of the village, but unfortunately it didn't work. The exception becomes the bacon here." The village chief didn't believe what Muzi King said. "Village chief, don't talk nonsense with them. They have supernatural powers and so do we." Dagao Ergu called out a person to the side. At this time, another person next to Ergu rushed out, and then several ice picks flew towards Muzi King. Ice ability. But the ice pick flew halfway, but for some reason it turned the tip of the gun and flew back to its direction. Several people were shot and fell to the ground. He ne shots. Waya hot te shush. He said to he tut hush. It is the ice in with the ice ability was nailed through his limbs by 4 slightly thicker ice picks and stared at the wall. He yelled in pain. Zhang Nanfeng sneered twice. "You eat too much human flesh and your mind is confused. Why do you counterattack your own direction? Let Lao Tzu teach you what ice is." Then he pinched a finger and hundreds of ice picks popped up around him and flew to Dagao. Before Dagao could utter his begging for mercy, he was stabbed to pieces. The only person with a supernatural power was killed, and the village chief was furious. "Kill them quickly." Those people immediately shouted loudly and rushed over with their knives in hand. They deliberately retreated to the open space in the front courtyard. Muzi King licked the corner of his mouth and smiled coldly. "Let you play tonight to relieve boredom. You can do whatever you want." Gu Ming and the others suddenly felt playful. they didn't bother to use their powers and fought directly with the village chief's people. Chen Wei took the telescopic stick and beat him hard, focusing on the elbows and knee joints. The force was so strong that the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Although Su Yi and Yan Yang have also practiced their skills, they are much worse than Gu Ming, but compared to ordinary people they are still very powerful. Yan Yang usually looks like a porcelain doll, but this time she twisted her hand without blinking and broke a person's hand. Su Yi even grabbed the kicked foot of a person firmly, bent his elbow and hit the knee hard with his eyes, and the person screamed loudly with a click, and his leg was broken. Among them, Gu Ming played with the most gusto. 2 uniquely shaped 30 cm long knives played clearly. In the shadow of swords and swords, he picked the burly Gao to cut the flesh and deboned or missed the knife. Crucial, but deeply visible. Mu Zikang stood by Wei Ran's side every step of the way so that Wei Ran could exercise properly. Wei Ran kicked the person who was trying to get close to her sideways. She didn't want to touch these disgusting people. She drew the gun from her back and shot the man in the head. All of a sudden, a more miserable cry for help sounded in the courtyard. Now. The wind is surging, bringing a hint of other danger. Mu Zikang's dark eyes slowly turned to look at the wall. Zheng Yi's face was covered with a layer of solemnity. He pulled Wei Ran behind him and said to Gu Ming in a solemn tone, "Come here." Chapter 43. Chen Wei and the others at the snow mountain base hurried over to surround Mu Zikang. A silver light appeared, and the protective cover appeared with a blue light. The shield was a little different this time, adding a barrier so that it couldn't be seen or heard from the outside. For Mu Zikang to call out the protective shield, there must be a critical situation. Sure enough, after a while, the familiar sound of heavy footsteps sounded outside, and then dozens of aliens appeared on the wall, adding to the sense of fear in the dark night. The village chief did not lie about one thing, that is, they had never seen the aliens before, let alone know that the passing aliens were attracted by the meat hanging in the courtyard and the smell of blood in the courtyard. This is really self-inflicted. As soon as the village head saw the ferocious and terrifying black monster, he knew what the horrible monsters those people who came to be killed by him were talking about. At this time, everyone was silent and stood there in fear at the moment, forgetting to move. Mu Zikang waved his hands back, and the group slowly retreated into the corner. The second dog in the courtyard was tortured by Gu Ming like a blood man, barely stood up and didn't notice what happened now. Suddenly a black shadow stood in front of him, some mucus dripped on his hair, and Gu raised his head slowly, a little unconscious due to excessive blood loss. What followed was a mouth wide open, spouting foul-smelling hot air. The long and pointed mouth was full of rows of sharp teeth. It stretched out its slender tongue to lick the fresh blood on Gu's face. Gu's body shook uncontrollably, and a puddle of water dripped from his feet. Finally, before Gu could react, the alien bit off Gu's head and swallowed it. The aliens on the fence jumped off the courtyard one after another, tearing apart people and devouring them alive. The village chief and others were so frightened that they recovered and fled around, but they couldn't match the speed of the alien. The village chief ran to the underground storage room when he was lucky to be there. Crack. Black claws pierced his chest. Then he picked up the village chief, and the other 2 aliens jumped over and tore him in half. A 2-meter-tall alien passed by the corner of Mu Zikang and his group. It stuck its tongue out and glanced at the corner dripping with mucus. Mu Zikang stared coldly at the hideous alien in front of him and protected Wei Ran and his party behind him. But the alien didn't notice anything and walked away again. Soon the village head and his group in the courtyard were all killed by the alien. One alien jumped onto the wall and hissed, and the other aliens quickly jumped out of the wall and disappeared into the night with the unfinished corpses. In the bitterly cold courtyard, only the stumped limbs and blood splattered everywhere are left to show the tragedy just now. After the alien walked away for a while, Mu Zikang repeatedly sensed that the alien within 5 kilometers had left, and then removed the protective cover. Jiang Nanfeng asked Mu Zikang unclearly, "Brother Cheng, We have encountered dozens of aliens before, and we can deal with them. Why didn't we destroy them just now? Others also looked at Mu Zikang, waiting for an explanation. Confused. Mu Zikang looked calmly at the wall where the aliens had just disappeared. Dozens of aliens are easy to deal with, but it's not just these dozens, they are just forwards. It was just a group of more than 300 aliens. I guess they are migrating and moving. The expressions of the group changed, but fortunately, Mu Zikang noticed the danger and avoided the confrontation with the alien in time, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. Wei Ran pondered for a while, then frowned and said, aliens generally won't move after they set up their nests. It's still migrating in winter when even the aliens don't like to move around, which proves that the aliens have begun to fill up their nests and divide their nests. Su Yi was puzzled and asked, what do you mean by dividing up the nest? Wei Ran scratched her little face and thought for a while and said, in layman's terms, it means that brothers will separate after disharmony. Ferocious beasts in the family, there will always be behaviors of dividing and grabbing territory, and the alien is no exception. Once the aliens reproduce in large numbers, they will often rob the nest and challenge the inside, and the defeated party will immediately withdraw from the original nest and find another nest to move. After being informed by Wei Ran's popular science, the others said, oh, in unison to show their understanding. Mu Zikang confessed that Chen Wei burned all the things made by the village chief and his group of people who died tragically here before, which can be regarded as doing something for these people. A few days later, Mu Zikang and his party arrived at the southern edge. In the past 2 days, I slowly saw more cars when I approached the south. It should be that the weather in the south is relatively better than that in the north. At least it will not be troubled by heavy snow and affect my escape. They had already reached the southern territory, so they slowed down and sometimes stopped at the side of the road to drink water and rest. This day, Chen Wei struck up a conversation with a fat boy who was also parked on the side of the road to rest. Brother, where did you come from? The fat little brother. Chen Wei came over suddenly, afraid to take out the knife, and said tremblingly, don't come here. I don't have any supplies for you to grab. It is estimated that I have suffered all the hardships along the way, so at this time, everything is in danger. Brother, I don't mean anything malicious, I just want to ask about the situation around here. Chen Wei raised his hands with a smile, and lifted his coat to prove that he was not carrying a weapon. But the fat little brother was still vigilant to keep a distance from Chen Wei, and said tremblingly, I came from Zhangyagang. Lishi has a base built on a snow-capped mountain, and it is said that aliens are afraid of the cold. After being attacked, I wanted to take refuge there. Oh, Chen Wei nodded thoughtfully, and then asked, how far is the snow mountain base from here? The fat boy replied in surprise, it takes about 2 days to drive straight from here. Do you want to go? Chen Wei heard what the fat guy meant, and wanted to go with him. He smiled, we don't necessarily, we have to see the situation, and we want to hang around first. Of course, the fat little brother will not waste any more time staying outside, he just wants to get to the snow mountain as soon as possible, so that he doesn't have to be scared anymore. Chen Wei took a can of water and some instant noodles from the car and put them on the ground as a toll for him and said, thank you, brother. Holding his arms in his arms, he was afraid that Chen Wei would go back on his word, so he drove away immediately. Chen Wei returned to the car and told Mu Zikang that there was a snow mountain base ahead. Wei Ran has also heard of the Snow Mountain Base, which turned out to be a nationally famous high-quality scenic spot. Because the snow mountain is high in altitude, it is cold all year round. It is indeed a safe place for a group of aliens not to want to go. But its only advantage is also a fatal disadvantage. It is extremely cold 365 days a year. There is a lack of heating equipment in the base, and many people do not have enough warm clothes. Many people will freeze to death every year. Moreover, the high altitude leads to thin air, and people with poor physiques will not adapt, ranging from dizziness to death. Chapter 44. Go to the Snow Mountain Base for the new year. Snow Mountains in Lishi Su Yi and Yan Yan Yang said at the same time. Now everyone else looked at the surprise shown by Su Yi and the young couple in doubt. Su Yi explained, oh, the place where Xie Yoying and I were born and raised was in Lishi. Lishi was especially serious when the zombie outbreak broke out, so Xie Yoying and I fled to Beijing. He didn't say home but just used the words born and grow up. The words that deliberately avoided family members should be some people in that place that he didn't want to mention. These Chen Wei and the others also noticed, but no one asked any questions. Mu Ziking pondered for a while with his eyes half closed, and then asked an unrelated question: is Chinese New Year coming soon? When he asked this question, everyone was stunned. Wei Ran raised her eyes to think about it, counted the days, and looked at Mu Ziking. The 27th of this month, that's about 20 days away. Mu Ziking nodded slightly. Chen Wei guessed what Mu Ziking was thinking. Brother Cheng, do you want to go to the snow mountain to celebrate the new year? Mu Ziking glanced at the others, pointed his finger on the armrest of the seat and said, we have never been to the snow mountain. Listen said the scenery is very good. Since we happen to have a base, we will spend a stable year there first. Zhang Nianfeng agreed with both hands and feet. This year we celebrate the new year together. It will be very lively. Su Yi, go up to the snow mountain in the future. You have to take us around. And finally, there is a place that the aliens don't want to come to. Although Su Yui hates the people there, he cherishes his current family very much. They are also excited to celebrate the new year together. He smiled happily. Okay. Xiaoying and I will take you there. There are many scenic spots on it. Yan Yang also smiled and said yes, although it is cold up there, it is really beautiful. And Wei Ran said, don't worry. Shushan's problems only correspond to other people, but they are negligible problems for Mu Ziking and his group. They have their own warm clothes and equipment. The four of Mu Ziking were originally strengthened by Mu Ziking's mother in a unique way, so there is no need to worry at all. She was just worried that Su Yiyai and Yan Yang would not know if they could bear it. Now that they are locals, that would be great. Although I decided to stay temporarily at the Snow Mountain base, I didn't want to hurry, so I stopped all the way, which was very relaxing. At noon that day, they passed a large-scale car manufacturing factory and decided to take a rest here. Wei Ran told Mu Ziking that he wanted to go inside, and Mu Ziking dragged her to look inside. When he saw the large automatic manufacturing machines, he couldn't let them go. He put them all into the storage space, including the repair machines. Walking to the back, a large open space is full of newly made cars, which are still powered by electricity. Of course, Wei Ran has to take them in. Whether you need it or not, there is no harm in putting it away first. Wen Chen. Wei asked everyone what they would like to eat at lunch. Everyone unanimously said no bacon rice. Put the peeled shrimps together and cook them together, and finally fry a soft boiled egg for each person. In the end, everyone's ramen bowl was full of luxurious instant noodles. Wei Ran likes to eat soft-boiled eggs, so she immediately stuffed the soft-boiled eggs into her mouth and chewed them. When she lowered her head, she found another soft-boiled egg in the bowl. She picked up a shrimp and handed it to Mu Ziking's mouth, laughing so hard that 2 small dimples appeared. Brother, you eat shrimp? Mu Ziking looked at her crooked and bright eyes with a smile, and the sweetness was so sweet that he fell into him. In his heart, he lowered his head and ate the shrimp into his mouth, chewing slowly. Well, the shrimp that Ran fed me was delicious. That's right, and this meat is tender and smooth, and my brother also. Chen Wei, on the side, looked at the two who were tired of it all day long and the food was tasteless. Did the two of them forget that he cooked it? When they were packing their things and preparing to leave, an off-road vehicle entered the depot, and 5 men got off. Wei Ran looked at the men and noticed that although they rested on the other side and seemed not to disturb each other, they peeked here several times. This is a case of robbery. At this time, the tallest man among them came over to chat up a conversation. Brothers, are you also going to the snow mountain? Su Yi was the closest to him, and he seemed to be struggling. Yes, there are aliens everywhere. Don't they all say there will the alien go there, so we will go there too. Coincidentally, we are also going to the snow mountain, but we heard that we need supplies to enter the snow mountain. How much supplies have you prepared? The tall man turned a corner and said. Su Yi was stunned, because he really didn't know that he had to hand in supplies before entering the snow mountain, but he also knew that this man was trying to trick them out. So along the way, pretending to be ignorant and eagerly asked, isn't it? We came all the way here with great difficulty, and the supplies we have on us to come here are already negligible. Brother, do you know that other than supplies are available there? Cars, my car is also fine. Materials? The tall man was satisfied with seeing Su Yi's anxious expression, and continued to coax. Don't worry, what materials do you have there? Let me help you see if there are enough to get in. There are 4 or 5 breads, the water just now was found from this car factory, and there are several large boxes of food in it. Su Yi was frustrated like a deflated ball. When the tall man heard that there was food inside, he immediately shook hands with the other accomplices and rushed directly past Su Yi. But they went inside and opened a few rooms, where there was no food except it was a mess. When the tall man thought of something, he rushed out in a rage, but there was no one else. Another thinner man looked through the garbage left by Muzikang and his group, and shouted loudly, Brother Wei, they are lying, they must have enough supplies, instant noodle bags are for each person. He cursed angrily, damn it, get in the car and chase them. Muzikang and his group, who were already on the road over there, couldn't help laughing. Wei Ran laughed so hard that she couldn't stand up straight. Haha, Su Yi, your expression is too similar, you can fool him around. Seeing her smiling like that, Muzikang's mouth curled up helplessly. Zhang Nanfeng burst into tears with laughter. Ha ha ha, if Su Yi is not in this last world, I think you can definitely be an actor. Su Yi laughed a few times embarrassedly. I really wanted to be an actor before. I signed up for a few TVB courses, but I gave up again without my brother's life. Now everyone laughed even louder. In some places, aliens don't like to move around in winter, so they ventured out and set up fairs on the side of the road in exchange for supplies. Muzikang and the others encountered such a market today. Wei Ran dragged Muzikang around to see what he wanted. She stopped in front of the seed stand that no one cared about, squatted down and looked at it, which was basically rice and vegetable seeds. Because water is very precious in the last days, these seeds naturally become items that are despised by people. But Wei Ran knew that after humans and aliens reached a balance, and after the stable and sustainable development of human beings, these seeds would become in short supply, so there were also seeds in the prepared materials. Chapter 45. Didn't it mean to eat noodles simply? But the supplies are not too much, so she asked the stall owner, how can I change these seeds? The stall owner is a woman in her 40s, with a saying from her hometown, 1 sack can be exchanged for a 250 milliliters bottle, unopened mineral water. If this woman had no choice, she would never let the seeds become so cheap, but if you told her not to exchange them, she would not believe it at all she needs now is water. There are 10 big sacks of seeds here, and Wei Ran gave her 10 cans of 5 liters of water. Wei Ran watched the woman thanking herself repeatedly for seeing so much water, and watched her quickly call her husband to put the water into the cart and push it home. Wei Ran sighed inwardly. Muzikang stroked her broken bangs and coaxed softly, she has already got what she wants. Wei Ran nodded lightly, took his hand and hugged his strong arm. In the last days, thinking it's a cruel thing to survive, we can't help, everyone has their own lives. At this time, Su Yi came over and easily took the sack to the car on the side, and the guard Ran took advantage of the fact that they were still strolling, and did not come back. The seeds are collected into the storage space. The closer the snow mountain base is, the more cars and people there are. In order to avoid troubles caused by changing, Muzikang directly changed to a man off-road RV, but it is not as big as the Element Palazzo RV, and it will be narrower to live in. There is only one room in this RV, and Wei Ran and Yan Yang slept together for the past 2 days, while the others opened the sofa in the living room and made do with it. In order to keep a low profile, no laser protection nets were installed, so several big men arranged to take turns to watch the night. The group walked slowly and stopped today and finally came to the big lake at the foot of the snow mountain. Yan Yang and Wei Ran were chatting in the room. Suddenly Yan Yang patted Wei Ran and pointed out the window. Xiao Ran, we have arrived at Tiangxin Lake at the foot of the snow mountain. Wei Ran followed Yan Yang's hand to look out of the car window, and was taken aback by the view of Tiangxin Lake, then excitedly stepped on the long snow boots, and ran out of the car without even wearing a coat outside. The picturesque and exquisite scenery of secluded forests and lakes gradually appeared in front of her eyes. This lake has a very unique lake blue color. The lake water is even clearer against the sunny blue sky and white clouds. Even the silt and shrubs under the lake can be seen clearly, and the surrounding secluded forests give it a sense of mystery. Wei Ran wanted to get closer but was pulled back from behind, and then the coat was gathered around her. She turned her head and saw Mu Ziking's slightly displeased eyes frowning. Raise your hands and put on your coat. The temperature outside is close to -5 degrees. How dare you run out without wearing a down jacket? Wei Ran laughed a few times and secretly stretched out the tip of Xiaofen's tongue mischievously and obediently put on the coat. When I first got out of the car, because I was focusing on the beautiful scenery and the temperature in the car was constant, I didn't feel cold when I got out of the car at first. However, after Mu Ziking said it, Wei Ran slowly realized how low the temperature outside was, and after a while, her little hands were already so cold that it was a bit uncomfortable. Mu Ziking felt her little paws were cold, and Junyi's face became even more gloomy. After warming her hands, she immediately put on pink thick gloves and a plush hat with big rabbit ears. After wrapping Wei Ran tightly to make sure it was warm, he turned around and walked back without saying a word. Wei Ran quickly walked 2 steps towards him. No matter what happened, it was just a bear hug. Her face was pressed against his chest, and she acted softly. Brother. Brother. I'm not good, I was wrong. Well. She put her chin between his chest again, raised her fair and delicate face, and looked at Mu Ziking pitifully with her bright and clear eyes. In fact, Mu Ziking wasn't angry at all. He couldn't put on a cold face when he saw her coquettish appearance, who told him that he loves her soft and waxy appearance the most. He raised his hand to pinch her little face with petting eyes, and his tone was still serious. You can rely on me to spoil you. Although our physique is different from ordinary people, we should pay attention to it, especially in this temperature. It's easy to be injured by low temperature. Wei Ran didn't dare to say anything, and nodded obediently. Don't dare. Mu Ziking then released the hand that pinched her small face and took her hand. Walking towards a gazebo hanging on the lake in front of him, Suyi said that the gazebo is higher than the flat ground, and the view is better. Wei Ran heard that she could see a better view and hurried 2 steps forward, keeping up with him. The other hand clasped his arm and chattered non-stop. All the people in the car watched the young couple play tricks. Yan Yang was surprised to see Mu Ziking's face suddenly changed for a man as cold as Brother Cheng. Only Xiao Ran can control him. Suyi nodded in agreement. Zhang Nanfeng, who came over from the side, said in a tone of voice, it's not just about surrendering. Xiao Ran is simply Brother Cheng's inverse scale. You can't touch it even if you say it. After wandering around for a week, Mu Ziking and Wei Ran discovered that they were actually in the secluded forest. A lot of people lived in tents not far away. There is also a large open space by the lake, but no one comes here. One is that it is windy and humid by the lake at night, and the other is that the open space is too conspicuous, fearing that someone will snatch supplies. Wei Ran guessed that those people were blocked by the threshold of supplies from the snow mountain base. But because the foot of the mountain is also cold, aliens seldom come over, so these people would rather stay next to each other than leave. Although it only takes an hour to drive up the mountain, they are not in a hurry. There are still some scenic spots at the foot of the mountain, so they decide to stay overnight by the lake. What's for dinner tonight? Jiang Nanfeng asked Chen Wei while pulling the extension of the caravan. Chen Wei said casually, although there is no one around us, it's better not to be too conspicuous, just cook some noodles. The others thought about it too, and then nodded in agreement. So Chen Wei started his dinner production. He used dozens of chicken racks and chicken to boil the thick soup, and then make the condensed soup cubes to adjust the delicious and fragrant soup base of the noodles. Then set up the frying pan, took out the butter and fried the steak, poured black pepper sauce on it, fried the shrimp, and mixed a plate of broccoli to get rid of the greasy. Others were stunned to see the bowl of a large steak with shrimp and broccoli. Zhang Nanfeng couldn't help asking, didn't you say you just eat noodles? Chen Wei felt that the question he asked was idiotic. Isn't that simple? The staple food is just noodles. Others, indalm. Okay, well, there is no simplicity in front of top cooks. Yo brother, a man's provocative voice came from not far away. Gu Ming sat by the lake and turned to look at them. Wei Ran also leaned out half of the car window to join in the fun. The leader is the man who made the car factory before. He led a dozen men of different heights and thinness, with knives or sticks in their hands. Soon she was picked up by a big hand, and only a crisp voice floated out clearly. "Brother, that lifeless person is here to rob again." The dozen or so men. Just at this time, Jiang Nanfeng came over to Gu Ming with a bowl of simple noodles that Chen Wei said. The dozen or so men looked at the pan-fried steak on the bowl of noodles with envy. It was the smell of black pepper that attracted them here. The guy named Wei De came to this secluded forest a few days ago and quickly gained up to become a bully. Not to mention bullying the people who lived here, he also stared at the newcomers every day and robbed them. But the people who came to this secluded forest would not have any supplies, so they ate bread and steamed buns these days, almost choked themselves to death, and finally came out as soon as they smelled the smell of meat. Jiang Nanfeng sat down facing them, picked up a pair of chopsticks noodles and stuffed them into his mouth before he was willing to take a look at the group of people, and gently pushed Gu Ming with his shoulder. "Who is it?" Gu Ming took a bite, which was tender and juicy without raising his head. "I don't know." Chapter 46. Seeing that they didn't take him seriously and he was tricked again in the factory before, Wei Ji waved his hand viciously. "You damn brothers, go and get all their supplies." Then he summoned the ability to transform Vajra body, and more than half of the people around him also summoned the ability. Jiang Nanfeng swallowed the steak in his mouth, and jokingly said, "Yo, I didn't expect that there are quite a lot of supernatural beings." The group of people swarmed up. Bang ... a gunshot. The group of people who were still passionate just now froze as if they were being acupunctured. Gu Ming felt that this group of people was disturbing his tranquility, so he pulled out a gun from the back of his waist and shot Ne Weige directly in the chest, causing some blood to flow from his chest. Although Wei Ji has the ability of the diamond body, his level is too low to reach the muzzle of the gun. Although Gu Ming's gun pierced his golden body, he could not be shot, but it still scratched the flesh. The sound was especially abrupt in the empty and quiet lake, and it surrounded the people in the secluded forest in alarm. Su Yue and Chen Wei also got out of the car and walked to Gu Ming's side. Su Yi saw Wei Ji's appearance, clearly recognized him, and held back a smile. "Hey brother, why did I see you here?" Then, immediately withdraw the ability. Clutching his chest and bowing his knees, he didn't dare to have a trace of hostility. "Isn't it because you are familiar with each other, and want to come over to say hello and see if there is anything that needs to be done?" Chen Wei pretended to be puzzled. "What about that? Come here with sticks and knives." He quickly put the machete in his hand behind him, with a flattering smile on his face. No, isn't there an alien? So we formed a self-defense team ourselves, and it's patrolling." The rest immediately agreed. Yes, we are patrolling." Chen Wei noticed that the faces of the people who came out of Yulin were full of joy to vent their anger towards this group of people, and he also guessed the usual rampant behavior of this group of people. He turned to Ne Weige with a face full of relief. "Okay, the patrol team is very good. I will give you guidance, and I will come down every few days to see how you are doing, if you dare to lie to me." He didn't say any more before saying the next sentence. Piao Piao took out a grenade from the back of his waist. This time everyone present was so frightened. Wei Di knelt down directly. No, I will definitely do it well, absolutely." Chen Wei waved them away, and they immediately fell to the ground. "Run away." The crowd burst into applause and applauded. They don't want to be good people, they just help when they meet. Just as Su Yi and Chen Wei were about to turn around, someone from the crowd that was dissipating made another sound. "Su Yi?" Su Yi heard someone calling him, subconsciously turned around and saw a disgraced young man standing 2 steps out of the crowd. It took him a while to identify the man carefully before he realized that it was his so-called uncle's son. Seeing that he recognized him, the man took another 2 steps forward and said excitedly, "Su Yi, is really you? Do you want to go up? Take me with you." Su Yi's pretty face was gloomy, and he snorted coldly, then turned and walked towards the RV. Seeing that Su Yi ignored him at all, the man raised his voice and shouted again. Su Yi, uncle. Your dad is also in the base, or you can help me tell uncle that I am at the foot of the mountain, and ask him to help me. And Su Yi paused for a moment, then got into the car. The young man eagerly walked towards Su Yi again, but was blocked by Gu Ming coolly. He didn't dare to say another word, and hurried back to Yulin. Su Yi returned to the car without saying a word and leaned against the window. Chen Wei patted him on the shoulder and walked away. The man's words just now were also transmitted to the car, but Mu Ziking and the others would not ask more questions. Su Yi would speak up if necessary, and those who did not want to speak out were those embarrassments that could not be said. Yan Ying brought the hot noodles and steak to his table, picked up the chopsticks and stuffed them into his hands and said softly, "Eat, I've been keeping it warm for you." Su Yi looked at the steaming noodles, felt warm in his heart, and turned to look at Yan Yang with a knowing smile. The next day, after visiting several scenic spots around, they slowly went up to the snow base. There is also an iron gate in the snow mountain base. Although it is said that aliens are afraid of the cold and will not go to cold places, who can guarantee that they will not come, and those unconscious zombies are not afraid of the cold. Fortunately, the snow mountain itself is a top-level tourist attraction. In order to ensure undisturbed clothing, food, housing, and transportation, there are towering walls. Mu Ziking and his team drove to the gate to inquire. Chen Wei got out of the car and knocked on the door and asked, "Hello, what procedures do we need to go through if we want to enter the snow mountain base?" With a swipe, a square hole on the iron gate opened, revealing a man's face. There is a communication port on the height of the iron gate, and the gatekeeper usually opens this square hole to communicate with people outside. The man lazily said the words that he estimated to have said countless times a day. You need to hand in materials. The basic entry is 1 bag of 20 caddies of rice per person, 2 bags of 50 caddies of rice, and 2 cans of oil for the intermediate class, and 2 cans of oil for the advanced class. It is 5 packs of 50 caddies of rice, and 5 cans of oil per person. If the amount of supplies is just for one person, it's okay, but many of them come with their families, which is considered expensive. What about ordinary people? Will carry so much rice? The man cast a glance at Chen Wei, and said again, of course, children under the age of 12 are exempt. Chen Wei was delighted. He was short at 1.85 meters. He asked again, then what is the difference between these few? The man gave a blank look, and replied the difference is huge. The basic ones can only go to the back mountain to find an open space to camp by themselves. The intermediate ones can have a suite for 2 people, and they can also have a single room if they are given an extra bag of rice. Then the high-end ones are of course comfortable small villas. The man added impatiently, you ask so many questions. Do you really want it? If you can't afford it, go to the foot of the mountain, where you can live anywhere you want without paying anything. Chen Wei, hey yes, I said brother, I don't have to ask clearly. He knocked on the door and said clearly, I want a small villa. The man was stunned for a while and said, are you sure the payment of this material is not permanent? It is equivalent to paying the rent once a month. If you can't pay it, you will be downgraded until you are evicted. The people who come here usually want to be below the intermediate level, and very few people want to be high level, only the 2 big families of the locals. Chen Wei nodded and said word by word, I want a small villa. After the gatekeeper led someone to count the supplies on the spot, he asked someone to take them to the villa area. They were driving behind the car of the people in front of them. They found that although the place is small, it is managed in an orderly manner. Mu Zicheng sensed for a while, doubts flashed in his eyes, and he said there is a high-level supernatural person here, who should be the person who manages the snow mountain base. This is the first time that Mu Ziking said that someone else is a high-level supernatural being. It stands to reason that it is not uncommon for high-level supernatural beings to appear now. It may be that he kills aliens and has a high experience gain. But Wei Ran saw that Mu Ziking's strangeness. She leaned close to Mu Ziking and asked, brother, did you notice that there was something wrong with that person? Mu Ziking lowered his eyes and stared at Wei Ran. Her level increase is unusual. Her level is 40, and all the supernatural beings we met before are at most 20. He raised his eyes and looked out the window. Even if she kills aliens every day, She will not have such an increase unless she kills hundreds, but it is absolutely impossible. When other people heard what Musikang said, they also felt that there should be something hidden in it. Wei Ran lowered her head and pondered. It is impossible to have red fruits outside, but such a large increase is not normal. The only possibility. She remembered why the aliens were vicious and cannibalistic in her previous life, but there was still a situation of mutual checks and balances. She also remembered some fragmentary scenes in her previous life that she was most unwilling to. Faceishao ran, it said that there was a lair abandoned by aliens, and there were still a few aliens in it, and now they don't like to move around in winter. And some ovaries can extract egg fluid, and the base asked Musikang to go, but he didn't want to go, saying that he didn't want anyone to be stronger than him. Musikang is a person who is completely different on the surface. Furong, if he doesn't go, I will go. Anyway, there are only a few of them, so weapons are enough. Ran. Musikang. No, brother. Bang. There was an explosion. Ran. Musikang's Shenrun voice whispered in the distance. From far to near, gradually clear. Ran, my brother is here. Wei Ran, who was caught in extremely chaotic memories, slowly broke away from the chaos in Musikang's soft whispers, and her eyes regained clarity. But his whole body stuck to Musikang's warm embrace as if his strength had been pulled away. Just being close to his temperature and listening to his strong heartbeat made her feel that all this was not an illusion. Ran, don't be afraid, brother is here. Musikang hugged her tightly and repeatedly murmured to comfort her. Wei Ran, who was in the car just now, suddenly felt cold and trembling all over, with cold sweat all over his forehead, unconsciously clenched his hand and kept murmuring brother. Musikang knew that she was thinking of those memories that made her fall into a nightmare again. When Wei Ran fully woke up, she realized that she had arrived in the room of the small villa, and Musikang was sitting with her hugged tightly on his lap. Brother, I'm sorry. Wei Ran put her head on Musikang's solid and reliable shoulder and murmured silently, crying. Musikang didn't say anything, just climbed up his smooth neck with his big hands, rubbed his rough fingertips carefully, and looked down to find her delicate little pink tongue, rubbing it to soothe. The rest of the men, taking advantage of this gap, wander around outside a few times to understand the situation here. The villa area and the suites are relatively close, only separated by 2 small streets, and the back mountain is relatively far away, and it takes 15 minutes to drive. There are densely packed with tents or small bungalows. Chapter 47. The odd-shaped egg liquid. Snow Mountain Base has never been able to become a large base, because it occupies a limited area on the mountain, and the number of entrants is limited. So the entrants are required to store supplies in exchange for the daily stable development of the base. Even so, the Shushan base will provide corresponding materials for the people who come in, so that the people who come in can live a stable life. People with supernatural powers can enter the Snow Mountain Guard team to receive fixed supplies, and ordinary people can also apply for corresponding positions based on their specialties. Although the Snow Mountain base is one of the earliest bases to be established, it is still difficult to keep up with the hardware equipment due to its own natural climate. But compared with other bases, the safety factor here is the highest. After all, it is true that aliens do not like winter. 2 hours later, Gu Ming and the others returned to the small villa after understanding the general situation. Su Yi walked in the front, and at a glance he saw 2 women standing in front of the small white fence gate of the small villa, looking around. He asked aloud, "What are you doing?" The 2 people didn't expect someone to come from behind. They were startled, turned around and said with a smile, "Hello, we are the managers of this villa area, so I want to ask you, there are only ordinary furniture in the villa, do you need some luxury versions?" Su Yi didn't understand this, so he shouted directly to Chen Wei behind him. "Chen Wei, these 2 people asked if they want furniture." Chen Wei left come over and say, "No need for furniture, that's enough. Thank you, we don't need it." One of them persuaded, "You must be tired after a long journey. Wouldn't it be better to have a soft bed at this time? Sweep away the tiredness comfortably. How about rest?" Chen Wei nodded in absolute agreement. Those two were overjoyed when they thought that Chen Wei was about to agree, but waited for him to say, so the bed that others have slept in is even worse. Don't want it. When the two heard that they really didn't want to buy any more furniture, their faces turned ugly. And because the people who lived in the small villa were rich after all, they reluctantly laughed and left with a vague sentence. Jiang Nanfeng smiled happily. This is a salesman. It's funny to see that ugly face. I guess the commission is gone. Su Yai looked at the direction the two left and nodded no. The furniture also wants to. Looking at the wool, the base manager is really enough to make the best use of everything. They entered the door laughing and talking about the interesting story of the two salesmen just now. When they walked into the entrance, they felt that the paintings on the wall and the decorations on the small table were still a little bit. He didn't take it seriously when he looked familiar, and he was dumbfounded when he entered the living room. Originally, I saw that there was only a sofa and a table in the living room, but now it has been replaced with the luxurious leather sofa and coffee table from the previous villa, and the familiar white plush carpet is still laid underneath. In the side hall next to the living room is still the familiar dark brown round dining table, and the stools are also placed in order. Chen Wei went into the kitchen to look inside again, and the set of kitchen utensils he often used was hung on the wall one by one. There are still a lot of gorgeous and exquisite furniture that cannot be placed, because this is indeed a small villa, and it is basically the same sky and ground as the previous big villa. But there is still a feeling of never leaving Beijing. This is simply a replica of a miniature villa in Beijing, Jiang Nanfeng exclaimed. In your room, I've put all your things in place, and you can watch the rest by yourself. Everyone looked at Wei Ran, who was going down the stairs again. There are exactly 5 rooms, 2 on the first floor and 3 on the second floor, and each room has its own bathroom. Wei Ran walked up to them with a smile. It's almost New Year's Eve, and there must be a sense of familiarity for the new year at home. These are all arranged by Xiao Ran one by one, and I can't get involved. Yan Ying stood beside Su Yi and smiled say. But Su Yi said worriedly, we just rejected that salesman's luxury furniture. Will we find that something is wrong with us in the future? Su Yi is right to worry. Muzi Kang's deep voice sounded from the living room. Everyone looked towards the stairs. He came down from upstairs and sat on the sofa calmly and gracefully put up his long legs. So we have to go out for a few days to give others the illusion that we have found something and come back. The thing is not a material, it is easier to find. Otherwise there is no way to say more things for no reason, and it is easy to reveal the biggest secret. So a group of people set off in a big way for a few days. Looking at the time, Gu Ming came back in a big car, pretending to be that there were many big items in the car, and Jiang Nanfeng followed behind in an RV. When they came back, they drove directly into the door again. From the outside, they didn't see whether they moved or not. Gu Ming and Jiang Nanfeng went to the top floor to install the water tower, and then connected the water pipes in the small villa. Jiang Nanfeng filled the water tower with a special disinfectant and turned on all the faucets in the small villa for disinfection and cleaning. Jiang Nanfeng refilled the water tower again, so that the water can be used safely. It didn't stop like this for a few days. Muzikang lazily leaned against Sharpie, leaning his strong forearm casually on the armrest of the sofa, discussing matters with Chen Wei and the others in the living room. Brother Cheng, the security team here will go out to search for supplies on weekdays, and will also accept orders from ordinary people. Sometimes they will post loose orders in the market announcement to let people with abilities who are not included in the list take orders. But Chen Wei paused, looked at Music King and continued. Today, there was an announcement from the Snow Mountain base on the announcement, which is to hire a team of supernatural beings above level 20 to go to Rongshan to destroy the alien nest. Everyone gasped. Ordinary people can't avoid the alien nest, but this Snow Mountain base is doing the opposite. There are as many or as few alien nests as there are tens or hundreds of nests and thousands of nests. If the number of people entering is small, then it will take more than half of the number of aliens in this lair to be able to barely protect themselves. But the problem is that no one knows how many aliens are in the nest inside. It was really hard for Su Yi to understand the behavior of the Snow Mountain base. He asked with a puzzled look, "What is the map of the snow mountain base?" "There are no supplies, only a pile of eggs." "What the snow mountain base wants are eggs." Surprised and confused eyes turned to Musikking. Musiking's half-drooped eyelids slowly lifted to reveal his black and indifferent eyes, and slowly opened his thin lips to be precise. "The manager of the snow mountain base wants this egg." Chen Wei and the others were even more puzzled now. "What's the point?" Because the abnormal growth rate of this high-level supernatural user is because he has encountered the egg fluid in the abnormal-shaped egg sac. Wei Ran appeared on the stairs to explain everyone's doubts. Everyone was staring at Wei Ran's face and emotions to see if there was anything wrong. Because Wei Ran was in a nightmare state when they came here on the first day, Yan Yan and the others saw Wei Ran's loss of control for the first time, and it really frightened them. Later, he only knew that Wei Ran was fine from Musikang, so he didn't dare to say a word in front of Wei Ran.